So all the brands and all those engineers at those brands, they do some weird things sometimes. One of those things is secret menus. And this is a real thing. I've come across it a few times over my years from all different brands and all different types of devices, equipment, tools, and for all different reasons as well. But this is a secret menu I don't think should be so secret. So if you are in the Profoto system, stick around. We've got a lot to talk about. What's going on, everyone? Seth Miranda here. I'm a pro photographer right here in New York. Welcome to my studio here in Manhattan. If you're a photo nerd or into any of that type of stuff, poke around the channel, hit subscribe. All right, YouTube requirements, done. Let's get into this. What am I talking about with secret menus and Profoto? So first of all, before we get into that, just know that this only applies to the latest remote, which is the Connect Pro, which is this guy right here, which is the latest remote at the time of recording this video. This does not apply to anything else, at least not now. So it does not apply to the Air TTL, which I'm sure a lot of you have out there because I think it's the longest running remote they had. Not to mention the all manual OG remote that I think everybody should have. It does not apply to the Connect, which is that little dot that has no buttons on it. And this, funnily, weirdly, strangely enough, does not apply to the speed lights, which a lot of us use as remotes, the A1, the A1X, the A10, which closely mimic, or at least out of all the options, mimics the Connect Pro, which is in my hand right here. Unless there's some Konami code that I'm not finding yet, I am going to dig a little deeper. I'm going to talk to Profoto a little bit more. I got a feeling there's something, it's in there, or maybe they haven't thought about putting it in there, but they are active with firmware updates. So maybe if we make this more of a discussion, it'll become part of the new firmware for the speed lights. And I'm hoping this will become part of a firmware update that just makes this not a secret menu and just an option inside the remote that's easy to get to, and you don't have to know what I'm about to talk to you about. So what is the secret menu about? This is about proximity, how close your remote is physically to whatever it's sending a signal to, which is your light. So for example, I've got this Profoto B10X Plus right here. And this is, pretty common and standard out there if you're in the Profoto system. It's been out there for a while. Right now, at the time of recording this, it's being replaced by the B30. However, I got into a weird position where the light wasn't firing, and in my entire career, I can count on my hand how many times Profoto hasn't fired, and basically it's always user error, and in this case, it's 50-50 in my opinion. So what happens is you've got your remote and it fires normal, right? Yay, it's firing, woo, firing. I was in a position where I was on a ladder and I ended up in a position where I was shooting top down. I don't even know how this shoot got to there, but it was one of those ones that you're just kind of like flying and it's evolving. I'm on a ladder. My light is just all the way up. It was in an umbrella and the umbrella's pressing against the ceiling, and then I'm getting up higher and higher and higher. And then all of a sudden my remote was basically touching the back of my strobe. Well, if it's touching up here, it still flashes, no problem. But if I put it back here, all of a sudden, no strobe, right? Well, what's funny was I took it off the camera, moved it a little bit, and we're back to strobing. Okay, so I'm like, I guess it's gonna be something with proximity. And this happens with all brands of strobes, all remotes, whatever. It's RF, it's radio frequency. This is just how it works. There's frequency size, all sorts of stuff, but you do have settings in almost every brand to adjust it. The thing with Profoto is I haven't ever had to do that. Some other brands might have something like, if it's closer than 36 inches, set it to this. I've never been in a position where I've even thought about that because it's never actually happened to me, but I can think of a few setups that I would do or that I've seen other people do that I could see maybe this getting into the weeds for them. However, I want to preface also by saying, even though it wasn't flashing for me when it was physically touching, I moved the remote just like this far away, and all of a sudden it's strobing again. And we're looking at 2 fingers away from the back of the light. So it was when it was physically touching, when it was an inch away from just the back of the light. This situation is so specific and so ridiculous. Profoto probably thought, hey, let's just make sure that we put the proximity adjustments in there, but we don't want people messing around with it because then we're gonna get a bunch of customer complaint calls because they don't know what they're doing. Profoto works really hard to make their interface as easy as possible for a couple of reasons. One of the main ones is it's the system that's in almost every rental house. So they want to make sure that if someone hires an assistant, they can just work this system. There's no like learning it. It's just very intuitive, very easy, very front facing, what you see is what you get kind of a thing. And they also want to make sure that it's not intimidating to new users or people that just want to shoot and not get stuck into menus and playing Pac-Man on the back of their strobe. You all know what I'm talking about. We've all gone through years of really complicated menus and interfaces with lighting. And I think they've done a great job, Profoto, for just simplifying it, just making it work. And if this is one of those weird cases, I mean, it's still firing really, really close to this light, even though I'm standing right here. It's only when it's touching. So this whole thing that I'm going to show you is just if you're in a situation where your remote is physically close to the back of your strobe. In fact, it might only affect you if the front of the remote is pointed towards the back of the light, because when I was like this, it doesn't fire. But when I pointed it this way, all of a sudden it's firing again, but it's still as close. In fact, here it is touching the light and it's just pointed that way and it's working. So very, very specific case. Where would you run into this? Well, aside from my weird situation where I was jammed up against my light against the ceiling, because if you know me, you know I shoot some pretty weird stuff. If you want, check out my Instagram. You can see all my weird photography there. The situations I would say is one, some sort of very tight, close macro situation. I could see this happening to some tabletop photographers. But another one that I think might actually happen, because I've seen some pretty crazy builds and setups out there, is if you're doing something with like a paparazzi plate, meaning that you're putting a strobe onto the camera with a plate and getting it like as close to lens as possible. And a lot of guys out there that are shooting will put the remote on and then have like an A2 or something small like right here. And it could probably be a situation where the RF signal just isn't going to work out. So why don't we go to a top down? I'm going to show you how to get into this menu setting and what this menu setting actually means. And we'll jump back to this for the closer. Okay, so let's get to this secret menu, right? So the center button gets you to the regular menu. You're going to scroll down to advanced. You're going to scroll down to about, which will get you to your serial number and all that crazy stuff. And then in this screen, you're going to hold down the center button and your modeling light button at the same time for a few seconds, and boom, RF settings. You've got 0 through 7. Default is going to be 1. So when I set it to 0 here, you can see that when I touch the tip of that remote to the strobe, it doesn't fire. It's just not happening, just like I showed you in the intro. But if we scroll down and set it to 7, all of a sudden it's firing and we're good to go. So I asked Profoto about this and they said that 0, 1 is like the farthest and 7 is the closest. Obviously based on that, what I just showed you. But I asked them if there was anything with these numbers as far as like actual distances, and they said not really. So you've got a scale from 0 to 7 to mess with. I'm going to tell you a personal opinion, leave it on 1 as the default. So even if you mess with these because of whatever situation you're in and it works great, just remember to go back and put it to 1, because you don't know what other situations this could be affecting. And 99.9% of the time, 1 seems to be working for everybody. So make sure you just put it back in default before you get yourself into some trouble. All right, so I hope that was helpful. I know that I looked around and didn't see much out there about it, but shout out to Chris Fain from Profoto. Does really cool live streams if you want to check him out, for cluing me in on this. I just figured I would jump in here and try to keep or start the discussion up, and maybe Profoto will go, you know what, let's just give it to him as an accessible menu. Anyway, I don't think this is just about proximity. I want to kind of also say that this is about wavelength, right? So if you're ever in a situation where something just might not be working out, whether it's distance or maybe you're just in some environment with some crazy signals that are affecting something that's going on with your strobe, I can't see that happening too much. I mean, I've shot in Times Square, which has every known frequency known to man shoving into one area, and I never had problems with Profoto firing with the RF remote. But it could happen, right? And at least you know that there is a menu setting that can get you to a niche adjustment that might save you. I also think that this could affect things like maybe there's a substrate between your remote and your strobe. Let's say you put it behind a wall that's got some density to it or some kind of material that's affecting the wavelength, the signal getting to from your remote to your strobe. Could happen, I don't know. But moral is, if you're in some weird situation and something's kind of acting a little goofy, try this out. The default setting's 1, but try to drastically change it. I'm talking going from like 1 to 7 and seeing if anything changes, because then you'll know definitely if it was something like that. But just try to put it back where you left it, because I don't know what's going to happen if you don't. Default again is setting 1. But let me know down below if you ever get into a situation where your strobe is touching your remote, because I'm curious what kind of lunatics you are, what you get into. But I could definitely see this being something that could happen if you are doing a strobe mounted to a camera itself, like I said, for the paparazzi type look, that on camera flash type banger type shot. And I think that this could definitely be helpful in that situation. But anyway, this video's gone long enough. Make sure you check out my work on Instagram at LastXWitness, and that is my name on all social, but I am most active in the story mode on Instagram, and you can join the Discord, by the way. Yeah, check it out, the Discord. Woo! That is a 24/7 forum for you guys. That is a home for you guys. If you are sick of egos and toxic people in comments and just being afraid to share or ask or whatever, in whatever online forum you're at, you might want to check out this Discord. It's full of people from all around the world. At the time of recording this, we've got about 1,000 people in there, and we kick out all the trolls. So you can share work, answer questions, ask questions, get feedback. You can also just talk about cool things like pro wrestling or food or whatever. I don't know. It's a really cool vibe in there. I'm very proud of that Discord, and I'm happy all the people that are in there are making the most out of it, and you could be one of those people, so make sure you join that. But for now, hit subscribe if you're into this for more videos. I mean, hell, there's a video right here. YouTube is telling me that this video is the best for the viewer. It's telling me right now. Whatever. Hit like, helps me out. I'll see you down in those comments. Let me know some things, and I'll see you on the next one, guys. Later.